Hi there, this is Raymond Beltran, Porterville City Council member, District 1 representative. And this video is going to be about the bus wraps. I know it's a popular topic with some people. And so this goes back to our April 7th, 2026 regular scheduled City Council meeting. It was consent calendar item number 4, and it had to do with the wrapping of 9 new city transit buses. So when we get these buses, they're all white. There's no um, markings on it, phone number or who they are. And so typically a municipality would put some type of markings on them, whether it's transit information, phone number, um, decals, just so people knew what it was. And in the previously, the city had advertising on these, and not just the buses, but also on some of the larger bus stop areas where they have plexiglass. So there would be advertising on them. Great way to get local businesses who want to participate to get their, basically a roaming billboard for them. And, it's a win-win, you know. For those that can afford it. Usually it was kind of the larger entity. Sometimes it was real estate. Porterville College, I believe, Family Healthcare has done it as well. But what was really interesting about that is it helps supplement transportation. Transportation doesn't raise any money for the city like you would a enterprise fund like water or trash, where we actually are charging a fee that it costs to run that enterprise or that service. And so that was just a small way to supplement, the service. Previously, I believe, well, from my recollection, I tried to find it, but um, it was roughly $100,000 from what I was told back in the day of all the overall advertising. Um, but given that, I don't know why the transportation director or even the city manager hadn't discussed part of the advertising could also be on the bus stops, the ones again with the large plexiglass. But going back to specifically just the buses themselves, um, we have these new wraps, which I supported over a year ago, I believe, or roughly a year ago. We had some money that could be utilized. It was, I want to say it was overly expensive in the fact that if we did a modified version, it would still probably be, $60,000, $70,000 to redo the wraps on the buses. But what's interesting is it's one of these things that falls between the gaps is you need personnel to sit there, whether it's an annual contract or biannual um, uh, for advertising, because let's say somebody pays for 1 year, but that we don't change the wrap for 2 or 3 years. So they actually get supplemental advertising until we find somebody else. And that takes staff time. And, but anyhow, going back to a little bit of the initial support of these was, we had some reserve funds that could go, well, specifically for transportation. Everything overall was operating fine. We didn't have any real issues. And so that 118,000 at the time was like, wow, okay, we got the money and we want this new look and image on our buses. Okay, I can get behind that. But you've learned over time, it's the questions you don't ask, because there'd always been two sides of the coin, the pros and cons of a lot of decision making. What we're seeing now is just kind of one side of the coin. So going back a little bit, why this is kind of controversial is months after we had approved the bus wraps, we had to suspend some of the routes because we didn't have enough funding to continue them. Um, and that was just a really, really bad, I don't know if you want to call it management in the director's part, and the city managers. And I say that because council can only make decisions based on the data that we're given. Had they been tracking the funding and kind of issues that were happening, they could have foreseen, just 3 or 4 months later, hey, we might not have enough money to finish out the fiscal year and we may have to cut routes back. So that was a little you know, um, I don't know if you call it bad messaging or looked poor on our side of doing something like to that extent. Now, the routes cost more than the $118,000, but it's not just the optics, but it's also those people who ride that bus. You know, we could have done a modification of maybe that bus route isn't running every hour, maybe it's running, 4 times a day, whatever it might be, a modification to meet the needs. Because although the bus routes were a little less ridership, and that's a big thing that comes back to us is you want to concentrate ridership where there's the most need. Now, does that go by volume or does that go by lack of access to transportation? Because by volume, it's going to be more on the west side of town, centralized part of town, because that's where majority of the neighborhood or concentration of residency density is. But if you move out to the south, north, or east side of town, um, those needs are probably a little bit higher. However, the ridership is lower. So it's this constant battle of who are you serving? Is it the people where there's the most people, which generally that's probably what people would go to. But then also you look for those who are, either financially, physically, economically, um, in hardships to get them and to where they need to be. And the the routes that we cut were to the Family Healthcare Network and to the college. And you would imagine like those are pretty significant institutions in our community. So I think there was a big backlash. So fast forwarding to this April 7th meeting, um, ended up passing. So the bus wraps will be very similar or exactly of the ones that are there now. Um, what I had proposed was a modification of about maybe 70-60% of the design stay, but about a 30-40% modification to allow for advertising, mainly on the back of the bus, maybe a little bit on the side, to bring in some revenue. And the feedback at the time was roughly about $8,000. And I'm out here at Zallad Park, and we got a city employee checking on all the trash cans and facilities. So great to see that happening here. I don't know how picked up on the microphone, but it was pretty loud in my ear here. So anyhow, the reason for the modification, my request was to supplement transportation. Um, I don't know if $8,000 is reasonable. To me, that's a huge drop in what had been, and I don't know if it's because it's only 9 buses, not maybe 18 buses. Um, but the other thing that was stated is, again, going back to a comment earlier about you have to renew these all the time. If you don't do a long-term contract, a 2 or 3 year contract, these bus wraps will have to be redone. But part of my thought process is, if this is only the back or minimal sides, you don't have to redo the whole thing. Maybe it's only a couple of $1,000s. Um, but again, it's looking for ways to generate revenue for transportation department that's not coming from taxpayers. These are willing participants, those who want to make the investment in their business. The city of Porterville has several campaigns for tourism and for local promotions. I know there's like Shop Local. There's all these different ways we spend money, but this was just a small way to bring in some revenue. I didn't look at the bus stops to see if that would double the revenue. And I think the vice mayor made a comment that it's there's not enough money in that. $8,000 is really not that significant. It's kind of a waste of time. But we're coming up to our city special session, city council meeting for our city budget, and there's all kinds of debts going on in our city. And this is nothing new. Past administration from probably the very beginning of our founding of our city, which is 124 years. I know there's a big celebration for the 100 year, but that's just for our charters, how we how we govern ourselves. But the incorporation of the city, the actual anniversary, like America, is actually 124, I believe. It's kind of interesting that thirst to celebrate and spend this extra money on stuff. But anyhow, this $8,000, times that year after year, it's just a way to generate money again to ease some of these things, so we don't have to worry about some route displacement or some other things that may come up. I thought again it's a win-win uh, way to do things. When you completely wrap the bus, there's no way to advertise anything. But the other part that was really interesting is, I believe on these new buses, the mayor made the proposal to have the new city seal um, put on these wraps. And I bring that up because this is interesting, because we passed, I would call it a resolution or a motion, that for 1 year the city of Porterville would have this new logo or city seal, and that would be the one with the farmer with kind of American flag backdrop celebrating the city's charter 100 years and America's 250th anniversary. What's interesting is that seal is only official and good for 1 year. So we're going to wrap these buses with those. Are they going to be changed out in a year? Because officially that's it. That will be an outdated, no longer legal seal. And so we're going to have to spend money to redo these in a year. But that's not a waste of money. But advertising to potentially make $8,000 a year was a waste of time. So it's just, I just want the community to understand my thought process, the way I'm trying to, um, make decisions that were best for the city of Porterville, the taxpayers, the department, the service that's ultimately, or the product and service that ultimately the residents benefit from. So this is specifically to the bus wraps. I'll be doing other videos for March 7th on some other items. But this, again, thank you for your time. Just so you can understand the controversy going forward, what that looks like, and just my input on how I thought we could have done that a little bit better. So again, just thank you for your time and look forward to the next video. Thank you.